We're talking about the future of cryptocurrencies as an actual currency. Joining us today is the CEO of CoinPayments, Jason Butcher, and he is here to discuss exactly that. Jason, welcome to the show. Welcome to Kitco.
Hello, thank you.
Jason, let's talk about how CoinPayments works first and foremost.
Well, CoinPayments is similar to a payment gateway platform that you might think of traditionally from a Visa or MasterCard. The difference is that our gateway technology solution supports merchants with accepting crypto as a form of payment.
Merchants being, what kind of merchants are we talking about? Are we talking about like DeFi merchants, or we're talking about vendors that everyday consumers can use?
Everyday consumers and DeFi, of course. But the majority of our clients that we service around the world are regular merchants. The likes of groups that use Shopify or things like Live Nation or many other types of merchants that are traditional merchants selling their products or services online and or at their retail store as well.
And so what gave you this idea of starting the company? Because like you mentioned, these are merchants and clients that you have that service everyday consumers, and I can already pay for my Shopify subscription or whatnot with fiat currencies. Why the incentive to start using cryptocurrencies as a form of payment?
Well, I guess I'll answer it in a couple different ways. One is the founders originally started the business in 2013. So their idea was they were selling hardware for the crypto mining space, and they were selling support and technology solutions back then. And they wanted to accept crypto as that form of payment. Of course, people had the option of paying them traditionally with credit cards. But if you go back 40, 50 years, credit cards didn't exist either, right? And at some point, somebody came up with the idea of providing the ability for merchants to accept credit cards. And it took a long time for that to adapt to people using it regularly. So today, after nearly over 8 years, actually since it started in 2013, today we're supporting merchants in about 180 countries around the world who are providing the option to their buyers, the ability to pay in crypto if they so choose to.
Okay. And the advantages of paying with crypto versus with fiat currency, what are they?
Well, there's a number of things. Mostly it's in the exchange of value where it happens quickly, so more efficiently, where if you use traditional forms of payments such as a Visa or MasterCard, often the merchants may be waiting 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. Sometimes we've even heard much longer. So from a merchant standpoint, when the buyer makes a payment with crypto, that payment is usually, I say immediate, but it's very short period of time. So within an hour type thing, usually you're going to see that payment within your wallet right away.
Some would say that an hour is still too long. How would you respond to that, Jason?
Well, you know what? It's I guess what you get used to, right? Yeah. So your expectations, once you've done one crypto transaction, then the second one, you're like, why didn't that happen within the 10 minutes that it happened the first time? So, usually we're used to people making a payment and going, yeah, we're going to get paid in a day or 2 days or 7 days. But now once you've received that first payment using crypto and you've received it in 10, 15 minutes, or maybe even less, your expectation is that every time.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the future now. Obviously, we started from a point of zero adoption to now partially adopted. I'm talking about cryptocurrencies being used as a form of payment. In what scenario do you see the entire world transacting with cryptocurrencies? Is that possible?
Well, I think anything is possible, first of all. I do believe that we're seeing a huge transition to digital payments. Now, digital payments started, 25 years ago. So today we're seeing more and more transactions going through digital, and with digital we're seeing more onset and more adoption to crypto. You can see the onset of platforms like the metaverses. You can see more people are interested in having instant payments. More people are interested in having control over their money. And some people relate to the developing world, such as say Africa or other markets, and they feel that that's going to be where the biggest adoption is. And yet really 20 some odd years ago, the Philippines was using telephone banking as the main form of payment between each other. So it's not really the developing world. It's the fact that today people are getting maybe having the choice of being paid in USDT or in Bitcoin. And the more people have those currencies, the more they have access to it, and the more opportunity that they have the chance of making their payments in those crypto.
And we'll talk about cryptocurrencies as a form of payment in more technical detail in just a bit. I want to talk about your platform and the coin that is being used the most in terms of transactions. What is the coin with the largest trading volume, or transaction volume, should I say?
Sure. Well, in the transaction side, we're still seeing the largest transaction volumes in Bitcoin. There is a transition we're seeing into more stable coins like USDT, which is, last January, we saw about 5 to 10% transactions in USDT, and now we're seeing much more higher, something such like 25% or higher. Bitcoin used to be around 90%, and today we're seeing it around 50 to 52%. And in similar businesses that we know of, other groups similar to CoinPayments, we're seeing the same and hearing the same kind of numbers. So, I think the numbers have changed rapidly this year with regards to transactions specifically.
Okay. There's two main arguments I've heard from critics against using Bitcoin as a form of payment, and I'd like to address both of them. The first being that Bitcoin is too slow and inefficient.
Well, like I said earlier, I mean, inefficiency is what expectations are, right? So when I want to make a payment and I know that payment's going to go through, I tend to use Bitcoin, because it's quick, it's immediate. I don't have a lot of transactional fees, et cetera. And I have a lot of confidence in when that payment is going to go through. At the same time, we're also seeing more interest in other blockchains where people are seeing faster transaction times. Just recently, one of our big clients asked us to ensure that we had Solana USDT added. So Solana is another blockchain. The USDT side of it allows for much reduced transaction fees, and the transactions are much quicker as well. So in some cases, I believe that we're going to start seeing other blockchains and other currencies, more stable coins, perhaps even more usage of CBDCs as they start to get distributed and the community start having access to it.
Okay. Well, what about the argument that Bitcoin intrinsically should be used as a store of value and not as a currency? I've heard some proponents of Bitcoin say that you should really hold it because eventually it'll go up in value. It's a waste of future value to be purchasing everyday items like a cup of coffee with something that's going to go up substantially in value. What do you think?
Yeah, you know what? I think the challenge with that is that if you look at the original white paper of Satoshi, it wasn't meant to be used as a store of value. I think today we have the investment communities. Obviously, the value of Bitcoin has spiked significantly, and there's a lot of speculation around the increase of value of Bitcoin. So if I'm going to make a purchase right now and I think, well, Bitcoin's going to go up 10% in the next day, I probably won't make a purchase with Bitcoin. At the same time, if I'm only holding Bitcoin and I want to make a purchase with crypto, I have to either sell my Bitcoin to convert it to, say, USDT, or I have to have already holding another currency in order to make that transaction using crypto. So I think in relationship to many things in the past, such as, say, gold or silver, if you're holding silver, are you going to make a transaction in silver when you think the value is going to go up, or are you going to convert it to your local fiat currency? Either way, you're selling it. So either way, you're still completing that transaction using your asset. So, I think that's the area that we're going to see some changes. More people will be issued things like CBDCs and or stable currencies. And as they have that, they'll start using that and then investing part of their, part of that avenue or that venue that they have into other currencies.
Okay. One last argument I'd like you to address. This is what Elon Musk said in an interview with Time magazine. He said that the transaction value of Bitcoin is low and the cost per transaction is high. At least at a space level, it is suitable as a store of value, but fundamentally, Bitcoin is not a good substitute for transactional currency. And he said that even though it was created as a silly joke, Dogecoin is better suited for transactions. So how would you respond to that?
Well, I think Elon is a great promoter. He's been incredibly successful in the businesses and the projects that he's been involved with. I think Dogecoin is represents an opportunity that I would say hundreds of other current currencies or cryptos like Doge actually represent. Other platforms that are out there. I mentioned Solana, USDT, or even USDT or USDC, or many other coins that are out there are actually much stronger and much better for currencies to be used as a transaction or transfer value. Difficulty is what's the community? If you have 5 million people who have Bitcoin around the world, you have a community of 5 million people who have Bitcoin to spend. If you only have 10,000 people who have Dogecoin, who's the community? So, and Doge is also a very volatile crypto as well. So if the person is holding Doge, are they speculating on the price of Doge as well? Yes, they are. If Doge was stable at $1, say, for example, then I think Doge would have a much better, stronger argument to saying, yes, would be a better transaction piece. But I think stable currencies are ultimately the best.
Stable coins are ultimately the best. Okay, so that's your opinion. That's your view on transactional currencies. Very good. So let's talk about the future now. Looking ahead, what group of people or what demographic do you think is going to lead the charge in adopting cryptocurrencies as a form of payment? In other words, if you were a vendor and you had to market your cryptocurrency side of the business, or at least the payment side of the business, who would you be marketing that to right now?
Well, I'd be marketing to anybody who currently holds crypto, right? Because as a merchant, just like I referenced many times in the past, if you were a merchant and you had Visa and MasterCard on your door, at one point you probably only had Visa, right? And you were marketing that little sign to somebody who had a Visa card. Eventually, you ended up putting up a MasterCard sign on your door as well. And today, I think it's beneficial for every merchant to put crypto accepted on that same door, because you're marketing to that same potential audience that person may very well have crypto that they would prefer to pay with rather than their Visa or MasterCard. Just like you see today, some people have Visa, MasterCard, they don't have Amex, right? So it's a similar form of method of payment that you're using something that the individual is holding at the other end to make their decision on what they're going to choose to make a payment with.
I read somewhere that in a survey done, millennials are the group that has as a group, they have the highest level of mistrust for traditional financial banking systems out of any existing age group. And the younger you go, actually, the higher that level of mistrust. So what's the correlation there between age and, I guess, your sentiment towards traditional finance?
I don't know that it's mistrust. I think it's a similar thing as, probably when we grew up, finances are not taught in schools, right? The educational element of what a bank is, my son who's 13 doesn't know, right? He doesn't know what a bank is. What he knows is on his technology that he's playing with and his social media that he's on every day, and the Fortnite that he plays, that he can buy and sell credits within his Fortnite instantly. He doesn't have to go to a bank. He doesn't need to go and learn about a credit card. So I think the financial element of things are changing rapidly, generationally, for sure. And in that market, you're going to identify, I identify anyways, that their demand of instant payments, instant exchange of value, tradability within their digital platforms is going to be where the future is.
Okay, so let's take someone like your son, for example. He's 13 right now. He's just learning about cryptocurrencies and, I guess, the basics of finance. In 10 years, he'll be in his early 20s. What's going to happen in 10 years? How much of his daily life is going to be transacted with cryptos, you think?
I think 100% will be transacted with crypto and or with digital currency. A digital form of transaction will be 100% of his life, for sure.
Okay. And that could be in the form of either cryptos or CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, or I guess, look, when you go out, I don't use cash anymore. My life is already digital, but you're talking about the next step. You're talking about not just fiat currencies, digital fiat. You're talking about digital currencies outside of fiat, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So that leads to the next point, which is regulation. Many of these coins that are being used for transactions are not necessarily legal tender in most places around the world. Do you think governments will eventually put the hammer down and say, hey, you can't use USDT to buy coffee?
You know what? I have challenges with that for a few different reasons. One is that I come from a traditional way of payments. So things such as barter platforms, for example, that have been around for 30 years, digital barter platforms. And these digital platforms have provided merchants, buyers, sellers, et cetera, to exchange and trade value between each other. And the currency that they're using to trade is their assets or their work or their service. Now, if you use crypto, which is simply the record of that transaction, the individual, you and I, for example, decide to trade value, and you're holding Bitcoin, and I'm going to be providing you a service. I'm going to be selling you a product. I'm exchanging that value with you, and we're basically using a barter dollar, which in this way is Bitcoin. So it's a digital form of transaction that's recorded on a blockchain that's saying, you and I are deciding to transfer value between each other. I'm just using Bitcoin as that record of transfer value rather than a dollar, rather than a Canadian dollar, rather than a euro dollar, or rather than, say, gold or silver. So in my view, there isn't any true difference in the fact that you and I have made an agreement together, and that record of measurement, that record of transaction value is recorded. And that might be Bitcoin, that might be Ethereum, that might be XRP, whatever that method of transaction of value is, this is now recorded and accepted between you and myself.
Well, we know that the public ledger is traceable, and that can be used by all parties, governments, and public and private, to trace transactions. So we know that, but the issue is whether or not the governments will see this as a threat to their national currency and stop it before the power of their currency erodes. We've seen China place bans, for example. China has very tight capital controls, and some speculate that China doesn't want any competition with the future digital yuan. And I'm just wondering if, let's say, the US has a similar attitude.
Sure. Well, I don't know specifically about the US if they have the same attitude, but I know that they've already identified and confirmed that Bitcoin is a exchange of value, and it is a currency. So in China, the announcements of banning stuff has been up and down and back and forth over the many years. And of course, China as a country, it has limited supply of different currencies, right? And it wants to control its own supply. When it made that announcement, it also announced its own digital currency. Now, technically, for many years, the majority payment method of transactions in China were using WeChat Pay, Alipay, and or CUCP. I think it's COP. Yeah. So everything was already digital already, right? So the transition to a different digital currency or another asset, I think is possible. I think that places like India, for example, who've also recently banned crypto as a form of payment, although not investment, is interesting to see as well. And I'm sure that they will announce their own stablecoin or their own CBDC very soon as well.
And I think it's just going back to Bitcoin and cryptos as a form of payment and their use case overall. I think the general public still has a learning curve to achieve. I was speaking to my mother, for example, last night. She's very financially savvy, but she knows nothing about cryptocurrency. She asked me, David, do you think Bitcoin will still be around in 10 years? That's a common question I get from a lot of people. How would you answer that question?
You know what? My expectation is that it will be. Will there be other currencies that people use as an exchange of value? 100%. But will there be this speculation? Will there be, will people look at gold as that sort of digital gold that so many people relate to? I think that that's a possibility as well. And I think that what I see with a lot of DeFi platforms is they're basically using Bitcoin as that leverage, as that facility to do their backing behind their loans. So I think that people in the financial markets have gotten creative and used platforms like Bitcoin as a method to be able to secure loans, provide assets, open things up to DeFi space, which is, very suitable for today's economy.
Well, speaking of applications in DeFi, the metaverse is an emerging trend. How do you expect the metaverse or the emergence of the metaverse to be integrated with cryptocurrencies?
Well, it's funny. Metaverse is not something new, right? It's
Sure.
when in the early 90s, I was involved with a number of different internet businesses. The very first one that I related to was eWorld. And eWorld was like the first metaverse. It didn't have avatars and didn't have 3D. But years later, Second Life came out. And I owned some property in Second Life. I had a bunch of different things, but it was too early, sort of like the internet was in the early 90s as well. Today, now everybody counts on the internet for exchange of information, their communication like we are today. And I think the metaverse space is the next phase of the internet, and it's already upon us.
Okay, strictly speaking, how do you differentiate between what we're doing now and the metaverse? I mean, I'm speaking to you through a digital medium. Yeah. So what's the difference between this and a metaverse?
I think where things are moving to, it'll give you more interaction and more personal feeling. So when you put on a Google or a sort of an Oculus, say, right? Yeah. So you and I are both wearing Oculuses and we're actually standing in the same room.
I see.
It gives us the sense of that feeling, that involvement and that participation, where this is very 2D right now. We're looking at each other perhaps, but we're not really feeling like we're in the same space. And there's a number of platforms that are out there today that I think are involving that. And going back to my 13-year-old, he already lives in that world. He expects that.
Okay. And so once we're in that virtual reality, that metaverse that you described, how will that lifestyle involve cryptocurrencies?
Well, I think the fact is cryptos, NFTs, smart contracts that allow for the exchange of value within that digital world is how it's going to be. There isn't going to be fiat exchange within those digital worlds. It will be a crypto or a digital currency within that world that you'll exchange value.
What's the dominant currency going to be? Dogecoin?
I have a feeling it won't be Dogecoin, but I have a feeling that each metaverse will probably have a dominant currency within each world. And then you'll have platforms that will allow for interoperability.
That's interesting. So you're kind of like how nations operate now. We have different currency blocks, and then we have an exchange through that commercial space. That's interesting. Okay.
I have a feeling that it's exactly how it'll be. Is within those areas, there'll be a dominant coin or usage. Of course, there'll be sub coins and things like that, but your dominant will be in each metaverse, and you'll have FX providers that will do that interoperability within the middle.
Well, what will these different metaverses be delineated by? They won't be separated by national borders, right? There'll be blocks of different themes, right? What will these different themes be, you think?
Well, I mean, I think you're going to see things like you're seeing already from Meta, for example, right? Meta is global, has billions of users, and they'll have different types of worlds. But of course, there's different people's interests. There is the gaming spaces, and the gaming spaces will be people who are in there specifically for that gaming experience and the gaming environment. Everybody has different desires and interests, right? So if I want to go, say, hiking in Brazil or somewhere like that, and I want to go put on my Oculus and get in the space, and I feel like I'm actually hiking through those spaces, or maybe I'm flying in the sky, giving myself that feeling, I might be going on a tour and a travel metaverse where I'm experiencing 3D vision of travel. So I think that you're going to see different experiences in different universes.
So I could go on going by your example, I could go on a travel metaverse, and then when I'm done with that, I could take the coins from that metaverse, exchange it for an esports metaverse, and then use a token from that esports metaverse and go play a game in that metaverse, right?
That's right. Exactly.
Okay. Well, that should be an interesting space to follow. Thank you so much for coming to the show today, Jason. It was an enlightening talk. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you for watching Kitco News. I'm David Lin. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.